The council chamber stretched wider than any building Robert Hayes had ever seen on Earth. Thousands of seats rose in circular tiers, each occupied by beings that would have seemed impossible just 5 years ago. Some had scales that shimmered under the artificial lights. Others had fur and colors that didn't exist in nature back home. A few didn't even have recognizable faces, just clusters of sensory organs that tracked movement across the massive hall. Robert sat in the human delegation section, his hands folded calmly on the smooth surface before him. 6 months had passed since humanity received their invitation to join the Galactic Council. 6 months of learning alien languages, understanding strange customs, and trying to find their place among species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Today's session focused on something Robert understood well from his years in the military: what to do when you discovered someone weaker than yourself. The debate had been going for 3 hours. High Counselor Sareth dominated the conversation from his elevated platform. The Draken leader stood nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian features sharp and predatory. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of certainty. "We have located 14 pre-spaceflight civilizations in the past century," Sareth said, his clawed hand gesturing at a holographic display. 14 worlds developing technology, expanding their populations, depleting their resources. If we do nothing, half will destroy themselves before they reach the stars. The answer is obvious. We intervene. We guide them. We prevent their self-destruction through our superior knowledge and strength. Murmurs of agreement rippled through one section of the chamber. Robert noticed they came mostly from species that looked like hunters. Sharp teeth, forward-facing eyes, powerful builds designed for chasing down prey. From another section came sounds of distress. Counselor Nima rose gracefully, her 4 legs moving in perfect synchronization. The Ulani resembled something between a deer and a horse from Earth, but with 6 eyes that could see in nearly every direction. Her voice was soft but carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "High Counselor Sareth speaks of guidance, but I hear only domination," Nima said. "These civilizations have the right to develop naturally, to make their own mistakes, to find their own path to the stars. Who are we to force our presence upon them? Our ancestors would have been terrified if a more powerful species appeared in our skies. We must respect their autonomy and their fear." This time the murmurs came from a different section, species that looked like they spent their evolution running from things rather than chasing them, eyes on the sides of their heads, bodies built for speed rather than strength, nervous movements that suggested constant vigilance. Robert watched the pattern repeat itself. A predator species would argue for intervention, citing strength and duty. A prey species would argue for isolation, citing fear and respect. Then another predator would counter. Then another prey species would respond. The debate went in circles, neither side willing to yield. Beside Robert, Dr. Alice Wong leaned close and whispered, "This has been going on for 30 years. Different topics, same argument. They're stuck." Alice served as humanities xenobiologist, but her real value came from her ability to read the room. She understood that this wasn't really about pre-spaceflight civilizations at all. It was about something much deeper. "They see the universe in binary," Robert whispered back. "Hunter or hunted, strong or weak, dominate or submit. And we don't fit their categories," Alice said. The debate continued. A insectoid species called the Chitar voted with the prey faction, despite looking like something that should be doing the hunting. A smooth-skinned aquatic species sided with the predators despite appearing completely defenseless. Robert realized the divisions ran deeper than appearance. They were evolutionary, psychological. Each species voting based on ancient instincts coded into their genes over millions of years. "The human delegation has been silent," Sareth said suddenly, his eyes fixed on Robert with an intensity that would have made most people uncomfortable. "Ambassador Hayes, your species is new to this council. Fresh perspective can be valuable. Where do humans stand on this matter?" The chamber fell quiet. Thousands of alien eyes turned toward the human section. Robert felt the weight of their attention but kept his expression neutral. This was a test, not just of him, but of humanity's place in galactic society. "The predator and prey factions each make valid points," Robert said carefully. "Intervention could save lives. Non-interference respects autonomy. Both approaches have merit." "That is not an answer," Sareth said, his voice sharp. "You must choose. Do humans believe in strength and guidance or weakness in isolation? Robert met the Draken's gaze without flinching. Humans believe the question is more complicated than that. Frustrated sounds echoed through the chamber. Some counselors appreciated his diplomatic non-answer. Others clearly wanted him to pick a side. Robert understood their frustration. In a galaxy divided into two camps, neutrality looked like cowardice or confusion, but Robert knew something they didn't. Something about humanity that would change how they saw everything. He just needed the right moment to reveal it. Perhaps the human ambassador needs more time to understand our ways, Nima said gently. This debate has challenged greater minds than his for decades. Or perhaps, Sareth countered, humans are simply afraid to commit. Indecision is its own form of weakness. Robert said nothing. He simply nodded and sat down, letting the debate resume without him. Alice gave him a questioning look, but he shook his head slightly. Not yet. Around them, the ancient argument continued. Predator versus prey, strength versus caution. Neither side understanding that somewhere in the vast universe, a species had evolved under completely different rules. Rules that made both perspectives seem simple by comparison. 3 counselors waited outside the chamber when the session ended. Robert had expected this. Neutrality made people curious, and curiosity brought questions. Counselor Brand approached first. The Chitar moved on 6 legs with mechanical precision, his compound eyes reflecting Robert's image 1,000 times over. Despite his insect-like appearance, Brand had voted with the prey faction every single time. Your restraint was noted. Ambassador Hayes, Brand said, his translator converting clicks and whistles into standard speech. Many species make bold declarations in their first major session. You chose silence instead. I chose to listen, Robert replied. My species has a saying. Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. Brand's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. Wisdom, though I confess confusion about human positioning. Your people built weapons capable of destroying your entire world. Surely this marks you as predators. Before Robert could answer, Nima joined them. The Ulani counselor moved with grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Her multiple eyes studied Robert with an intensity that felt invasive despite her gentle manner. Yet humans eat plants as well as meat, Nima observed. Your biology suggests omnivore tendencies, neither pure hunter nor pure gatherer. This makes classification difficult. The third visitor surprised Robert. Sareth himself strode down the corridor with the confident gait of someone who had never been prey to anything. The Draken leader nodded to the others before addressing Robert directly. I have studied your species since you joined the council, Sareth said. Your history shows warfare, conquest, and competition. These are predator traits, yet you hesitate in our debates. Why? Robert glanced at Alice, who had been standing quietly nearby. She gave him a small nod. They had discussed this moment during the flight to the council station. The moment when humanity would have to explain themselves. Can we speak somewhere private? Robert asked. Sareth's eyes narrowed, but he gestured agreement. The group moved to a side chamber designed for informal discussions. The room was smaller, but still impressive by human standards, with viewing windows that showed the vast starfield beyond the station. Robert waited until everyone had settled before speaking. You asked why humans hesitate. It's because we understand both perspectives. Impossible, Sareth said flatly. You cannot be both hunter and hunted. Evolution does not work that way. A species develops along one path or the other. The prey become fast and alert. The predators become strong and cunning. You cannot be both. Humans were persistence hunters, Alice interjected. We didn't have the speed of prey animals or the strength of apex predators. Instead, we followed our targets for hours or days until they collapsed from exhaustion. We outlasted them. That is still predator behavior, Brand observed. Yes, Robert agreed. But humans were also scavengers. We ate what other predators killed and left behind. We gathered plants and insects. We lived in groups for protection against things stronger than us. For most of our evolutionary history, we were prey to multiple species. Big cats, wild dogs, bears, even large birds hunted early humans. Nima's eyes widened. You were hunted? But you survived to dominate your world. How? We got smarter, Robert said simply. We made tools. We learned to communicate complex ideas. We cooperated in larger and larger groups. Eventually, we eliminated or tamed every other predator on Earth. This explains your adaptability, Brand said thoughtfully. but not your hesitation in the debate. If you conquered your world, surely you understand the predator perspective. Robert exchanged another glance with Alice. This was the edge of the revelation, but not the full truth. Not yet. We understand the predator perspective, Robert said carefully, and we understand the prey perspective. We lived both sides of that relationship for millions of years. When you debate intervention versus isolation, we see valid arguments in both positions because we experienced both throughout our evolution. Sareth's tail lashed with irritation. You speak in circles, Ambassador. Your species achieved dominance. That makes you predators. Accept this reality. It's more complicated than that, Alice said. Human psychology doesn't fit cleanly into predator or prey categories. We have instincts from both. We can be aggressive and territorial like predators. We can also be cautious and cooperative like prey. Sometimes we're both simultaneously. Fascinating but irrelevant, Sareth said, though his tone suggested he found it more disturbing than irrelevant. Evolution creates specialists. Predators excel at hunting. Prey excel at escaping. Generalists like your omnivore ancestors should have been outcompeted by specialists. Yet humans dominate Earth completely. Something in your explanation is missing. Robert smiled slightly. The dragon was sharp, sharper than Robert had given him credit for. Sareth sensed there was more to the story, something that explained how a species of generalist scavengers conquered an entire planet. You're right, Robert admitted. There is something missing from the explanation, something that made humans different from every other species on Earth. What? Nima asked, her voice almost eager. Robert looked out at the stars, thinking about human history. The wars, the atrocities, the genocide, the countless ways humans had found to destroy each other, the suffering that had forged his species into what they were today. I'm not sure the Council is ready to hear that part yet, Robert said quietly. Sareth's eyes gleamed with something between curiosity and suspicion. You cannot make such a statement and then refuse to elaborate, Ambassador. What is this missing element? An evolutionary pressure, Alice said. One that doesn't exist for any other species we've encountered in the galaxy. What kind of pressure? Brand asked. Robert turned from the window. The kind that explains why humans show no fear of predator species and no disdain for prey species. The kind that taught us to think strategically, to deceive, to cooperate against common threats, and to trust carefully. The kind of pressure that only exists when survival requires outsmarting something as intelligent as yourself. The three counselors stared at Robert in silence. He could see them processing his words, trying to understand what he meant. They didn't get it yet. They couldn't. Their evolution hadn't prepared them for the concept. I think, Sareth said slowly, that you should explain this more clearly at the next council session. This missing element may be relevant to our debates. Robert nodded. When the time is right, I will. But I warn you, the answer may be disturbing. Truth is often disturbing, Nima said softly, but it is still truth. Robert hoped she would remember those words when he finally revealed what made humanity unique. When he explained the predator that had shaped human evolution more than any other, the one that had taught humans to be smarter, faster, and more dangerous than any other species on Earth. The predator that had been human all along. The emergency session was called at midnight station time. Robert received the alert while reviewing historical records in his quarters. A border incident had occurred between ships from the Predator and Prey alliances. No shots fired, but close enough that tensions had reached a breaking point. Now the council chamber buzzed with angry voices. The usual order had dissolved into something approaching chaos. Sareth stood at his platform, roaring challenges at the Prey faction. Nima's delegation huddled together in defensive formation, their voices raised in collective protest. Other species shouted from their seats, some supporting intervention, others demanding isolation. Enough. The council speaker, an ancient being named Elder Moth from a species that predated most others in the chamber, brought down his ceremonial staff. The sound echoed like thunder, and the chamber fell into tense silence. We have maintained peace for 2,000 years, Elder Moth said, his voice thin but carrying authority. We will not allow old divisions to tear apart what our ancestors built. But I will also not pretend this division does not exist. The question of intervention has brought us to the edge of catastrophe. Sareth stepped forward. Then let us address it directly. The Prey factions accuse us of barbarism for wanting to guide lesser civilizations. They call us conquerors and tyrants. But what is the alternative? Watch worlds destroy themselves through ignorance. Stand by while preventable disasters kill billions? That is not strength. That is cowardice. The Predator faction erupted in agreement. Roars, howls, and clicking sounds of approval filled the air. Nima rose to respond, her legs trembling slightly with emotion. And the Predator factions accuse us of weakness for respecting the autonomy of developing worlds. They call us cowards for not forcing our will upon others. But what is strength without wisdom? What is guidance without consent? Intervention is simply conquest with prettier words. We remember what happened when stronger species decided they knew better than weaker ones. The scars of those ancient wars still mark our galaxy. This time the prey faction responded with their own sounds of support. Whistles, chirps, and harmonized calls that spoke of unity and shared fear. Both sides speak of the past, Elder Moth said wearily. But we must decide the future. The council cannot remain paralyzed. A vote must be taken. But before that vote, I ask each faction to state clearly what they propose. The next hour was painful to watch. Each side presented their position with increasing aggression. The Predator faction wanted active intervention protocols. The Prey faction wanted absolute non-interference laws. Neither would compromise. Neither could see past their evolutionary programming. Robert sat quietly through it all, watching the ancient divide grow wider. Alice leaned close and whispered, "We need to say something. This is spiraling out of control." "I know," Robert whispered back, "but timing matters. Let them exhaust their arguments first." Finally, Elder Moth turned to the human delegation. "Ambassador Hayes, your species has remained silent through this crisis. Humanity must now choose. Will you stand with those who believe in active intervention, or with those who believe in absolute non-interference? The time for neutrality has ended." Robert stood slowly, every eye in the chamber fixed on him. He could feel the pressure of their expectations, their demands that humanity pick a side in a conflict older than human civilization. Elder Moth, with respect, "I don't think choosing sides will solve this problem," Robert said. "It is not about solving problems," Sareth interjected sharply. "It is about declaring where humanity stands. Are you with the strong or the weak? The hunters or the hunted? You cannot remain in the middle forever." "Actually," Robert said calmly, "humans have extensive experience remaining in the middle. We understand both perspectives because we lived both throughout our evolution." "You have said this before," Sareth said, his voice carrying frustration. "But understanding is not the same as choosing. You claim to comprehend the Predator mindset. Prove it. Tell me, Ambassador Hayes, what Predator have your kind ever truly feared?" The question hung in the air. It was a challenge, designed to force Robert into admitting humanity had never faced real danger. That their claims of understanding prey species were false. That they were predators pretending to be balanced. Robert looked around the chamber, at the predator species who had never known fear, at the prey species who had never known dominance, at the thousands of beings who had evolved in clear categories, following simple rules of hunter and hunted. And he made his decision. The moment had come. "You want to know what predator humans feared?" Robert asked quietly. "What drove our evolution? What forced us to become smarter, faster, more cunning than any other species on our world?" "Yes," Sareth said impatiently. "Name this great predator that shaped humanity." Robert took a breath. "We hunted ourselves too." Silence fell across the chamber. Complete and total silence. Not a sound, not a movement. Thousands of beings frozen in shock at three simple words. "What?" Nima finally whispered. "The predator that shaped human evolution more than any other," Robert continued, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was revealing, "was other humans. We didn't just hunt animals for food. We hunted each other. For territory, for resources, for pride, for revenge. For reasons that made sense at the time and reasons that made no sense at all. Humans have spent more time and energy killing other humans than we ever spent on any other prey." Sareth stared at Robert as if seeing him for the first time. "You're saying your own species was your primary predator?" "And prey," Alice added, standing beside Robert. "Humans were both hunter and hunted because our greatest competition was always other humans. The smartest prey we ever faced was ourselves. The most dangerous predator we ever encountered was our own reflection." Brand's compound eyes seemed to shift colors. "That's impossible. Species don't prey on themselves. Not systematically. Not as a primary evolutionary pressure." "Most species don't," Robert agreed. "But humans did. For hundreds of thousands of years, the biggest threat to any human group was another human group. We developed language partly to coordinate hunts, but mostly to deceive other humans. We created weapons to fight animals, but perfected them fighting each other. We built civilizations to protect ourselves from human raiders and conquerors. The chamber remained frozen. Robert could see the alien mind struggling with the concept. It violated everything they understood about evolution, about survival, about the basic rules of nature. Nima's voice shook. You evolved by preying on your own kind? We evolved by surviving our own kind, Robert corrected gently. Every other predator on Earth was predictable. They hunted according to instinct. But humans? Humans could plan, deceive, adapt. The only way to survive other humans was to become smarter than them. And they were doing the same thing. It was an arms race of intelligence with our own species as both weapon and target. The implications rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. This was the missing piece that explained everything about humanity. Their adaptability, their strategic thinking, their ability to understand both predator and prey perspectives. They had evolved under a pressure that no other known species had faced. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Robert remained standing, letting his words sink in. Around him, thousands of alien beings tried to process something that went against everything their evolution had taught them. Elder Moth spoke first, his ancient voice uncertain. Ambassador Hayes, you are claiming that intraspecies predation was not an aberration in human evolution, but the primary driver? Yes, Robert said simply. Humans killed more humans than any disease, any predator, any natural disaster. It wasn't random violence. It was systematic, organized. Tribes fought other tribes. Nations conquered other nations. Empires rose by destroying other humans and fell when they were destroyed in turn. Sereth's claws gripped his platform edge. But why? Resources are abundant in most ecosystems. Territory can be shared. Why would a species systematically hunt itself? Because we could, Alice said. Because humans occupied the same ecological niche. We wanted the same food, the same water, the same safe caves and fertile valleys. But unlike animals competing for resources, humans could plan. We could hold grudges. We could teach our children to hate the children of our enemies. We turned competition into warfare. Brand's translator crackled with what sounded like distress. This is horrifying. How did your species survive? How did you not drive yourselves extinct? We almost did, Robert admitted. Many times. But the same intelligence that made us dangerous to each other also made us adaptable. We learned to cooperate within our groups to fight other groups. We developed laws to limit violence within our communities. We created treaties and alliances when it served our interests. Every human alive today is descended from people who were very good at two things: killing other humans and working with other humans to avoid being killed. Nima had moved closer, her multiple eyes wide with what looked like horror and fascination. The psychological impact must have been tremendous. How do you trust your own species when your own species is your greatest threat? With great difficulty, Robert said. Human history is full of betrayals, backstabbing, and broken promises. But it's also full of remarkable cooperation, sacrifice, and loyalty. We learned that working together made us stronger than fighting alone. Trust became valuable precisely because it was so dangerous. When a human trusts another human, it means something because we know exactly how much damage that trust could cause if broken. Sereth was pacing now, his tail lashing in agitation. You're describing evolutionary madness. Natural selection should have eliminated this trait. Species that prey on themselves should not thrive. Unless, Alice said, the pressure created by competing with equally intelligent opponents drives rapid evolution. Humans didn't need to evolve bigger claws or sharper teeth. We needed to evolve bigger brains. Every generation, the smartest humans survived and reproduced. Not because they could hunt animals better, but because they could outwit other humans. Think about it, Robert continued. When a predator hunts prey, the prey's best defense is physical. Speed, camouflage, armor. But when a human fights another human, physical advantages matter less than mental ones. Strategy, deception, prediction. Understanding what the other person will do before they do it. Humans evolved to be natural psychologists because failing to understand another human's intentions could get you killed. A small counselor from an amphibian species raised a webbed hand. And you carried this trait into space? Into your civilization? It never left, Robert said. Even in peacetime, humans compete with each other. In business, in politics, in social status. We channel the aggression into non-lethal forms, but the underlying drive remains. Every human knows that other humans are the smartest, most dangerous, most unpredictable thing they'll ever encounter. This explains so much about human behavior, Brand said slowly. Your elaborate social rules, your complex hierarchies, your obsession with reputation and honor, all of it serves to manage intraspecies competition. Yes, Alice confirmed. Humans had to develop incredibly sophisticated social systems just to live together without killing each other constantly. Morality, ethics, law, religion, all of these things emerged partly as ways to control human violence against other humans. Sareth had stopped pacing. He stood very still, staring at Robert with an expression that might have been respect or might have been fear. I asked what predator your species feared. You feared yourselves. That's why you show no fear of us. Compared to fighting other humans, fighting any other species is simple. We're predictable. I wouldn't say we have no fear, Robert said carefully. But you're right that humans find other species easier to understand than each other. Your instincts are consistent. A predator species acts like a predator. A prey species acts like prey. But humans? We might act like prey one moment and predator the next. We might cooperate today and compete tomorrow. We're unpredictable because we had to be to survive each other. Nima made a sound like a mournful whistle, and this is why you understand both our perspectives. Predators believe in strength and dominance because that's how they survived their environment. Prey believes in caution and community because that's how we survived ours. But humans survived by being both predator and prey simultaneously, with your own species as opponent. Exactly, Robert said. When Sareth argues for intervention based on strength, I understand because humans have used strength to protect and guide weaker human groups. When you argue for caution based on respect, I understand because humans have learned the cost of forcing our will on other humans without their consent. Both instincts exist in humanity because both were necessary for survival. The chamber had erupted into dozens of private conversations. Robert could hear the shock, the disbelief, the attempts to understand what they'd just learned. Elder Moth rapped his staff for attention. This revelation changes the context of our debate, the elder said. If humans truly evolved under such unique pressure, then perhaps their perspective has value we did not recognize. It's obscene, a voice shouted from the prey faction. A species that preys on itself has no moral authority to advise others. It's impressive, another voice countered from the predator faction. A species that survived itself must be incredibly strong. Robert held up his hands for quiet. It's neither obscene nor impressive. It's simply what happened. Humans didn't choose this evolutionary path. We adapted to it. And yes, it was horrible. The suffering humans inflicted on other humans throughout history is almost incomprehensible. Billions died in wars, genocides, and atrocities. We nearly destroyed ourselves countless times. But you didn't, Brand observed. You survived and reached the stars. We did, Alice agreed. And maybe that gives us something useful to offer this council. We understand the predator impulse to dominate because we've felt it. We understand the prey impulse to avoid conflict because we've needed it. And we understand something else that neither pure predator nor pure prey species experience. What? Sareth asked. The knowledge that our greatest enemy can also be our greatest ally. Robert said quietly. The same humans we fought yesterday might be our partners tomorrow. The same capacity for violence that made us dangerous gave us the capacity for cooperation that made us unstoppable. We learned, through terrible cost, that working together achieves more than fighting alone. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was different. This was the silence of consideration rather than shock. Robert could see the minds working, processing the implications, trying to understand how this changed everything. Finally, Nima spoke. What do you propose, Ambassador Hayes? How does your unique evolution inform our debate? Robert smiled slightly. That's what we should discuss at the next session. Because if there's one thing humans learned from hunting ourselves, it's how to find solutions that neither pure predator nor pure prey would see alone. News of Robert's revelation spread through the galactic capital faster than light could travel. Within hours, every species with access to human historical records was reviewing them with fresh eyes. What they found disturbed them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Alice found Nima in an observation garden, 2 days after the emergency session. The Ulani counselor stood alone among alien plants, her 6 eyes fixed on a display screen showing human history. The images were difficult to watch. Battlefields, destroyed cities. Mass graves, is this real? Nima asked without turning. Or is this some kind of propaganda? It's real, Alice said softly. All of it. That particular clip is from a conflict humans called World War II. It happened less than 100 years ago. Nima's legs trembled. The casualty count says 60 million. 60 million of your own species. In 6 years, yes, how? Nima's voice carried genuine anguish. How does a species look at itself and choose such destruction? Alice moved closer, her own eyes on the screen. We didn't see ourselves. That's the problem. We saw enemies, different nations, different ideologies, different races. Humans are very good at dividing ourselves into us and them. Once someone is them, our evolutionary programming kicks in. They become the competitor, the threat, the other human group that needs to be defeated. But they were your own species, Nima protested. How could you not see that? Because seeing it would mean recognizing we were killing ourselves, Alice said. And that recognition is painful. So we created narratives. Stories about why this group of humans deserved to die while our group deserved to live. We're very good at justifying violence when we need to. Nima turned away from the screen, unable to watch more. I have been reading your history for 2 days. The wars, the genocides, the systematic elimination of human groups by other human groups. It never stops. Different names, different reasons, but the pattern repeats across your entire history. Yes, Alice agreed. It does. And you consider yourselves civilized? We consider ourselves survivors, Alice said quietly. Civilization isn't our natural state. It's something we built to control our natural state. Every law, every moral code, every social structure humans created exists partly to stop us from killing each other. We're not civilized by nature. We're civilized by choice, and it's a choice we have to keep making every day. Across the station, Brand was having a similar conversation with Robert. The Chittar counselor had pulled up human military records, studying them with his compound eyes. Your tactical sophistication is remarkable, Brand observed. The level of strategic planning, the complexity of deception, the coordination required for these operations. This goes far beyond animal hunting. Because we weren't hunting animals, Robert said. We were hunting opponents who could think, plan, and adapt just like us. Every tactic we developed, our enemies would eventually counter. So we had to develop new tactics. Then they'd counter those. It was an endless escalation of strategic thinking. This section on psychological warfare, Brand pointed at the screen. You created methods specifically to break the minds of other humans, to make them fear, to make them despair, to destroy their will to fight. Yes, Robert said, because humans understood that defeating the body wasn't enough. You had to defeat the mind. You had to make your enemy believe they couldn't win. Physical weapons kill people, but psychological weapons kill hope. Brand's translator made a sound like static. This is the most sophisticated predatory behavior I have ever seen. But you're using it against your own species, against beings with families, with feelings, with the same capacity for suffering as you. That's what makes it effective, Robert said bluntly. We know exactly how to hurt each other because we know exactly how we hurt. Predators hunting prey need to understand their target's physical vulnerabilities. Humans hunting humans need to understand psychological vulnerabilities, social bonds, emotional triggers. We became experts in human nature because we had to be. Brand was quiet for a long moment. Do you understand why this horrifies us? Why the prey species especially find this almost incomprehensible? I do, Robert said. Prey species evolved to survive predators. The threat came from outside. You developed strong social bonds within your species because unity meant survival against external threats. The idea of that threat coming from within, from your own kind, it violates every instinct you have. And predator species? Brand asked. Predators evolved to hunt prey. They compete with their own species for mates and territory. But systematic intraspecies predation is rare. Most predators have instincts that prevent them from killing their own kind too freely. Humans somehow bypass those instincts. Or maybe we never developed them because our intelligence let us rationalize the violence. Meanwhile, Sareth had discovered something in human history that changed his entire perspective. He called Robert to his private chambers, an honor rarely extended to other counselors. I have been studying your military history, Sareth said without preamble, specifically your strategies and tactics, and I have realized something disturbing. What's that? Robert asked. Every military engagement I have ever studied, Every battle my species has fought follows predictable patterns. Predator species fight with aggression and strength. We use our natural advantages. Our tactics are sophisticated, but they're based on instinct. Sareth's claws tapped against his desk. But human warfare is different. It's based on prediction. Prediction? Robert echoed. You fight by predicting what your opponent will do, Sareth explained. Your strategies aren't just about strength or speed. They're about understanding your enemy's thinking, their probable responses, their weaknesses and judgment. You win by outthinking your opponents, by being several steps ahead mentally. That's how you survive fighting someone as smart as yourself, Robert said. Physical advantages are temporary. Mental advantages are decisive. Sareth stood and moved to his window, looking out at the stars. I asked what predator your species feared. Now I understand why you show no fear of us. It's not arrogance. It's experience. You've spent your entire evolution fighting opponents smarter and more dangerous than any of us. We must seem simple by comparison. Not simple, Robert corrected gently. Just different. Your species developed in an environment where you were the apex predator. No other species on your world could challenge you intellectually, so your strategies are optimized for fighting less intelligent prey or competing with your own kind over mates and status. Human strategies are optimized for fighting equals who are actively trying to kill us and who are just as smart as we are. And that makes you dangerous, Sareth said quietly. Not because you're stronger or faster, but because you're used to opponents who can think. Any strategy I develop, any tactic I employ, you've probably seen a human equivalent and know how to counter it, because humans have been countering each other's strategies for hundreds of thousands of years. Yes, Robert admitted. That's accurate. Sareth turned to face him. I thought I understood strength, Ambassador Hayes. I thought strength meant power, meant the ability to dominate others. But human strength is something different. It's the ability to survive when your greatest enemy is your own reflection. Back in the garden, Nima had pulled up more records. These were cultural, not military. Art, literature, philosophy. Your species created all of this, Nima said, wonder mixing with her earlier horror. Beauty and wisdom and profound understanding of suffering. How do you reconcile this with the violence? We don't, Alice said honestly. That's the human condition. We're capable of incredible cruelty and incredible compassion, often from the same person. The same minds that planned wars also created poetry about peace. The same hands that built weapons also painted masterpieces. Because you understand both, Nima said slowly. You understand violence intimately, so when you choose peace, you understand what you're choosing. Your compassion isn't ignorance of cruelty. It's rejection of it. Despite knowing exactly what cruelty can accomplish, yes, Alice said, humans know violence works. We've proven it works thousands of times throughout history. But we also learned that violence has costs, not just in lives lost, but in what it does to the victors. You can't spend generations hunting your own kind without it changing you. Nima's eyes met Alice's. Is this why humans seem so cautious about using force? So reluctant to make threats? Partly, Alice agreed. We know exactly how quickly force can escalate, how easily conflict can spiral out of control. Because we've lived it. Every human war started with someone thinking they could control the violence, use it for limited goals. Most of those people were wrong. Around the station, the understanding was spreading. Prey species saw humans in a new light. Understanding their caution came from experience, not weakness. Predator species gained respect for human strategic thinking, recognizing it was forged in a crucible none of them had faced. But with understanding came discomfort. Because if humans could evolve by hunting themselves, what did that say about the nature of intelligence? About civilization? About the costs of becoming a spacefaring species? These questions would need answers. And humans, having paid the price to learn them, were the only species qualified to provide those answers. 2 weeks passed before the council reconvened. 2 weeks of alien species studying human history, struggling with revelations, and slowly accepting what humanity represented. When the session began, the atmosphere had changed completely. Elder Moth struck his staff once for attention. The chamber quieted immediately, thousands of beings waiting to see what would happen next. This council has debated intervention protocols for 3 decades, the ancient leader said. We have been deadlocked by our evolutionary differences, unable to bridge the gap between predator and prey perspectives. Ambassador Hayes's revelation about human evolution has given us much to consider. Today we will vote on new protocols informed by this consideration. But first, Ambassador Hayes has requested to speak. Robert stood, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. Alice had helped him prepare the proposal over the past 2 weeks. They had consulted with both factions, listening to concerns, incorporating feedback. What he was about to present wasn't purely human thinking. It was something synthesized from all perspectives. "Thank you, Elder Moth," Robert began. 2 weeks ago, I revealed something about humanity that shocked many of you. We evolved by competing with ourselves, hunting ourselves, surviving ourselves. This created unique psychological traits and strategic thinking. But I want to clarify something important. This doesn't make humans superior. It makes us experienced in a specific kind of survival challenge. He gestured at the display screens around the chamber. A new image appeared showing the proposed protocols. Humans learned something through our painful history, Robert continued. We learned that rigid thinking leads to extinction. When we saw the world as only black and white, only us versus them, only predator or prey, we suffered terribly. Progress came when we learned to think in shades of gray, to adapt based on circumstances rather than instinct. The predator faction argues for intervention because they see strength as a tool for guidance and protection. This isn't wrong. There are times when a civilization needs help to survive. Sareth nodded slowly from his platform. The prey faction argues for non-interference because they understand fear and respect autonomy. This also isn't wrong. There are times when intervention causes more harm than good. Nima's ears twitched in acknowledgement. Humans propose a middle path, Robert said. Not because we're trying to please everyone, but because we learned through experience that most situations require nuanced responses. We suggest a tiered system of protocols based on specific circumstances rather than blanket policies. The display changed, showing detailed breakdowns. Alice stood to help explain. Tier 1 would be minimal observation for civilizations showing stable development, Alice said. No interference, just monitoring to ensure they're not facing extinction threats. This respects their autonomy while maintaining awareness. Tier 2 would be indirect assistance for civilizations facing natural disasters or cosmic threats, she continued. Asteroid deflection, disease warning systems, things that help without revealing our presence. This provides protection without domination. Tier 3 would be direct contact for civilizations on the verge of self-destruction, Robert added. War, environmental collapse, existential threats. But contact would be offered, not forced. They would have the choice to accept help or decline it. And Tier 4 would be active intervention only in cases of imminent extinction, with no time for consent, Alice finished. Reserved for extreme situations like gamma-ray bursts or sudden cosmic events. This would be rare and require unanimous council approval. The chamber buzzed with conversation. Robert let them discuss for a moment before continuing. This system acknowledges that both factions have valid concerns, he said. Predator species are right that sometimes intervention saves lives. Prey species are right that forcing contact causes trauma. The answer isn't choosing one philosophy over the other. It's recognizing that different situations require different approaches. Brand raised his hand. This seems reasonable in theory, Ambassador, but who decides which tier applies to each situation? The same evolutionary biases that divide us now would divide us then. That's why humans volunteer to serve as mediators, Robert said. Not because we're better than you, but because we have experience thinking from multiple perspectives. A council of humans would review each case and make recommendations, but the final vote would still belong to this full council. Sareth's tail lashed thoughtfully. You're offering to be the bridge between our factions. Yes, Robert confirmed. Humans evolved by surviving the deadliest predator in our world, ourselves. That forced us to develop empathy and strategic thinking simultaneously. We understand the predator drive to act and the prey caution about overreach. We can evaluate situations from both angles because we have both instincts. Nima stood gracefully. I have spent 2 weeks studying human history. It is horrifying, but it also demonstrates something remarkable. Humans learned to overcome their evolutionary programming. You still have violent instincts, but you choose not to follow them. This is what we need. Species who understand instinct but aren't controlled by it. I object, a voice called from the Predator faction. Humans are untested in galactic affairs. Why should we trust them with such responsibility? Because we've already been tested, Alice said firmly. We tested ourselves for hundreds of thousands of years. Every human alive today is descended from people who chose cooperation over conflict when it mattered, who chose to build rather than destroy, who chose to trust despite knowing exactly how dangerous trust could be. We paid the price for wisdom in our own blood. Sareth surprised everyone by speaking in support. I have studied human military strategy extensively. Ambassador Hayes was correct. Humans fight by predicting their opponents, by understanding how minds work, by staying flexible in their thinking. These are exactly the traits we need for evaluating intervention scenarios. Each case is different. Each requires understanding multiple perspectives. Humans have proven they can do this. But can we trust them? Another counselor asked. A species that hunted itself might see other species as prey. Robert met the counselor's eyes directly. That's exactly why you can trust us. We know what it's like to be both predator and prey. We know the cost of predatory behavior because we paid it. We've seen what happens when the strong dominate the weak without consent. We've lived through genocides and conquests and oppressions. We don't want to repeat those mistakes with other species. And more importantly, Alice added, humans understand that the prey today might be the predator tomorrow. We learned to see long-term consequences because short-term thinking kept getting us killed. When we evaluate an intervention, we won't just think about the immediate effect. We'll think about how it changes the civilization's entire developmental path. Elder Moth had been silent, listening to everything. Now he spoke, his ancient voice thoughtful. I remember when predator and prey first came together to form this council, he said. It nearly failed. We almost destroyed ourselves fighting over the same questions we face today. What saved us was not agreement. We still disagreed. What saved us was the recognition that both perspectives had value, that wisdom required seeing from multiple angles. He paused, letting his words sink in. Humanity offers us something unique. Not a solution that makes everyone happy, but a bridge between perspectives. A species that understands both sides, not through study, but through survival. I support this proposal. The vote took 3 hours. Species caucused, debated, argued. But slowly, a consensus emerged. The proposal passed with 78% approval. Not unanimous, but strong enough to implement. After the session ended, Sareth found Robert in the corridor. The Draken leader extended his clawed hand in the human gesture of respect he'd learned. I asked what predator your species feared. Sareth said quietly. You told me you feared yourselves. Now I understand what that means. You've already survived the worst predator in the universe. Everything else is manageable by comparison. Robert shook his hand carefully. We survived ourselves. Barely. And we learned from it. That's what we're offering the Council. Not superiority. Just expensive lessons we'd rather not see other species have to learn. Nima approached as Sareth left, her multiple eyes soft with emotion. And I understand why you trust so carefully now. You know betrayal intimately. When humans offer trust, it means something because you know exactly what trust costs. Yes, Robert agreed. We know what trust costs, but we also know what it's worth. Humans couldn't have survived without learning to trust each other despite the risk. That trust is what let us build civilizations instead of just destroying each other endlessly. That night, Robert stood at an observation window looking at Earth. The blue and white marble hung in the darkness, beautiful and fragile. On that world, humans had spent millions of years learning the hardest lessons in the galaxy. They had been predator and prey, hunter and hunted, killer and victim. They had hunted themselves to the edge of extinction countless times, but they had also learned to stop, to choose differently, to build instead of destroy. Alice joined him at the window. Do you think we can really be the bridge they need? I think we're the only ones who can be, Robert said. Not because we're special, because we paid the price for understanding. Every human who chooses peace knows exactly what they're choosing. Every human who offers trust knows exactly what they're risking. Every human who shows mercy knows exactly what mercy means. We survived ourselves, Alice said softly, echoing Sareth's words. We survived ourselves, Robert agreed. And maybe that's humanity's real contribution to the galaxy. Not technology or art or philosophy, just the simple proof that a species can be its own worst enemy and still choose to be better. That evolution doesn't have to be destiny. That creatures shaped by violence can still choose peace. Below them, Earth continued its ancient rotation. On its surface, billions of humans lived their lives, most never knowing they were the products of the deadliest evolutionary pressure in known history, most never realizing they were proof that intelligence could overcome instinct, that choice could defeat programming, that a species that hunted itself could learn to become something better. The galaxy had its bridge now, built not from stone or steel but from understanding purchased with suffering. Humanity would serve as the connection between perspectives, the translators of instinct, the species that understood both sides because they had been both sides. And in the darkness between stars, that bridge would hold, because it was built on the foundation of the hardest truth humanity had ever learned, that surviving yourself is harder than surviving anything else, and everything after that is just practice.